And welcome to the Smoke Break. We are here every Sunday from 9 to 10 a.m. on Shady Pines Radio. I'm your host, your old pal Zane, here with Taylor Barrett.
What up, everybody?
And Noah Dino Dad Rubin.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, welcome to the show. Welcome to the show. Noah is a therapist, a comedian, and a producer over here in the Northwest, based out of Seattle, correct?
Yes.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you for your work and all that you do.
Oh, thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So this week we wanted to talk about decompression. I'm sure that you know a little bit about that. Tell me a little bit, what is your definition of decompression?
Well, there's I think it's always kind of the personal way of looking at it, and then there's kind of how I look at it in terms of my work when I work with like children and families predominantly. I think what it is we are so in this position to kind of feel so as if we have to be busy and focused on so many different things, and there's always different stressors coming our way. And sometimes we look at it as a hobby, but I think it's really trying to figure out the space to have an opportunity to reflect. And when you realize that you need to reflect, you realize, oh, this is decompressing. And we fight that feeling because we feel we have to go. A lot of people do.
Yeah.
And it's hard to strike that balance. And,
Definitely.
Yeah. And there's even pressure to strike that balance. Sometimes you feel like people are telling you, hey, strike a work-life balance. And you're like, I don't know how.
Definitely. Well, I think like the importance of decompression for me is just, like taking time away from the things that like I really enjoy doing. Like even though something that I enjoy doing, maybe comedy, maybe music, like taking time away from that, even work, I enjoy my work, but like taking time away from that to relax is super important for me. Taylor, what about you? What does decompression look like for you?
I guess throughout my life, I've kind of defined decompression as like an opportunity or just like a set time aside to like not worry about things, like and that can be really hard to do when there's a lot of things that you have to worry about. And that in itself, like the act of decompression, I feel like can become its own chore where you might need to decompress from what you initially assumed was your decompression, especially if you're like you mentioned, your hobbies can you can set a really high standard for how you perform in your hobbies, or like how skilled or capable you are at your hobbies, and that can become its own work. And so setting time aside from that to, just like you said, reflect and just not have to worry about anything is I think like a much better definition of decompression than just not working,
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think that, the hardest part about decompression for me is just that, like, because I feel the need to go, because I feel like that is what is productive, like it's hard to justify doing anything other than that. What about for you? Like, would you say that you feel similarly?
I feel as if these are things that are not taught to us, they're told to us. And, I think not just about being a parent, but I also think that it's just, if it's modeled for people how to decompress to some degree, and I feel as if when you're decompressing, you get those times to reflect and kind of really be with your feelings and thoughts, because you're not, in order to be, in my opinion, like a healthy individual, you have to be pretty grounded and aware a lot of the time. And it's hard to do that because there's different things that kind of make you frustrated or want to snap.
Sure.
And if you've kept it together and then all of a sudden you have a period of where there's downtime and you're able to kind of think about that moment where you were triggered or whatever.
Yeah.
Allow yourself to have like feelings, whether you're with somebody or not. It's sometimes nice to have another person there to be like, you're not crazy.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
And I think that's kind of my like personal experience of it, and kind of what I try to help people realize with what they're going through.
Definitely. Taylor, do you think it's important for like people to decompress together?
I think that can be very important. I think it's very per the individual. Like, I'm not a therapist, so it's hard for me to give my clinical 2 cents on that. But I think that there are times where I have benefited from decompressing with somebody. Like you and I play video games together plenty of the time. But I think there's also like when it gets really intense, when you've kind of like pop the cork on your intensity, like it's that might be a good moment to like reflect on your own. So it's hard for that to not spill onto other people. You know,
Definitely.
there's times where, you know, even you and me have like bled onto each other just because we're so escalated and we're being so intense, and it's hard to notice that you're even at that point because it feels almost like you're being attacked by the world. At least in my case, but
Yeah.
But yeah, like there's benefits to both for sure.
Right. I totally see that. And you know, it's glad you kind of said about when things have bled onto each other. You know, the test of like a good, healthy friendship too, or professional friendship or whatever it is, when those things happen and then you get space and then you come back and you kind of think about your role in what
Yeah.
was going on, and everybody can take like ownership of that part. And you're like, cool, we're still good, healthy people, and that feeling is valid. We're both not crazy together.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I think that, you know, like taking that time to decompress so that you can come back to the other person and be like, okay, like I was coming from an escalated state, you know,
Mhm.
like I was frustrated and I didn't know how to explain that frustration. So it's
Mhm.
like being able to take that time by yourself. For me, like a lot of decompressing comes from like just talking things out with people, you know, because I feel like it's a lot of times like I have a problem and it only remains to be as prevalent of a problem as like my mind keeps convincing itself that it
Mhm.
is.
Mhm.
So it's like for me, a lot of times it's like coming to my friends and coming to, you know, guests on the smoke break and just be like, hey, I have this thing that's really like is just, you know, in the forefront of my mind. Help me try to navigate this. And I've noticed that like people, whether they know how to do it exactly or whether they learn how to do it, you know, like people can really help you, and community can really help you just
Mhm.
navigate some of that stuff.
Totally.
I think that I've noticed that you and I have a good like lexicon. We have a pretty good word bank, and so our ability to communicate with each other when we're escalated, like when we're escalated like that, has been usually mutually beneficial. And I think like you mentioned, we're not taught how to do these things. We're just told to do these things. A lot of people lack the just the words and the like the communication experience to like know how to describe what they're feeling, and I feel like that has made people more frustrated in those moments where like people might not know the term escalated, people might not know the term decompression even, and that describing how to, you know, calm down from that has been that like a completely unique frustration for them to navigate that they don't have the words to do.
Yeah. It is it's one of those things that even in the work I do with families is trying to assist a lot of kids and parents getting better. I don't like saying the word better, getting more proficient in articulating their feelings instead of going to the extreme. And I think a lot of people do that because they can't articulate it, but they know that this feeling is really big and it's
Right.
scary. And I try to say, "Hey, we have to figure out a way to articulate that feeling because I understand that things have gotten really, really bad, but we need to like say, is this what we're feeling or is this what we're really feeling?" And I
Yeah.
try to get the kids that I work with to say that, and then I try to get them to actually communicate that to their families.
Yeah.
And when it happens, it's really, really nice, because then, you know, sometimes there's so much shame even attached to, like even admitting it wasn't that thing that they said, you know,
Yeah.
like, you know, their darkest thought. And then they, you know, then they say, okay, this is what I was really feeling. I felt misunderstood. I wasn't feeling like anybody was listening to me.
Right.
And I started to feel really mad and I'm ashamed of my reaction to you. And then the parents in that healthy dynamic say, thank you. Like, you don't have to feel embarrassed about any of this. And then there's
Yeah.
like connection again. Cause I think like if we all need to, we all want connection. But we also have to know when, you know, boundaries and space are needed too. And
Definitely.
you know, recognize that to kind of maintain a healthy, just a healthy individual presence and um, a collaboration.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So how has like comedy helped you with decompression?
Wow. It. I think what comedy has done for me is it created a vehicle for what um, I was really interested in.
Okay.
You know, I started working with children and families in the behavioral capacity in Seattle in 2008. And, you know, I was just kind of thrown in as like a residential counselor at a group home for boys. And I saw a lot of kids. I had to do back in the day, they would like show you how to like de-escalate and escort them, which was so uncomfortable.
Right.
And then I can kind of continue my journey and became a case manager. And I started developing all these organizational skills and figuring out where resources were and things like that. Got my master's in counseling, became licensed, and just continued doing the work. And then in 2020, when I started doing comedy and then took over this open mic, and people kept coming in and I was just trying to stay organized, I started kind of listening to people differently, listening to comedy very differently,
Sure.
understanding that people are taking some aspect of who they are up there, looking at jokes differently. And then I realized that what some of my strengths that I gained in what I've been doing was case management. I said, there's a lot of overlap here in organizational stuff and
Yeah, I
production
can see that.
and trying to bring people together and trying to kind of nurture a positive, healthy atmosphere and kind of make that what I'm about. And I really try to do that. I really try to like meet people and see what what their goals are. Cause I feel as if I create an opportunity for somebody and they get to fulfill being on stage or just kind of getting to that next level, I just like to see it happen and kind of
Yeah.
be there in some shape or form. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
How has comedy helped you with decompression?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think it's helped me process a lot of stuff that was like just difficult for me to like try to like understand about myself, you know? I think like being able to put like, because people usually say, you know, tragedy or comedy is tragedy plus time, you know, and it's just like once you've had enough time from that tragedy, it's like, how do you process it?
It's a very Shakespearean concept.
Yeah, definitely. But it's like I would definitely say that like, you know, once I've had enough time to like process something, that it's really helped me, you know, process it by saying it out loud, you know, and like sometimes some of those what I feel like really insane thoughts, you know, seem a lot less insane when I say them out loud, and
Right.
you know, there's kind of like that reaction of like, oh, okay, like you're right, that is kind of goofy. So for me, it's been like a validating thing, but at the same time, I can say that it's also been like a stressful thing because it's like if I'm in a bad mood and I think that comedy is going to help and it doesn't, then I'm in a worse mood. You know,
Yeah.
now I'm not only in a bad mood, but I failed at the thing that I want to do.
Yeah.
I can relate to that.
Yeah. How so?
I've always played a lot of like competitive games. I was really into the fighting game community for a long time, and like if you go to a tournament to, you know, decompress, then you get your ass beat. It's a little less cathartic than it would be if you perform the way that you wanted to.
Yeah.
Even outside of fighting games, just, you know, playing ranked in any game is a slog sometimes, and it can be pretty brutal. There's always you're gonna lose a lot. So if that's your go-to for decompression, you might want to find a second thing.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think that, yeah, just even saying that, like the things that are like competitive that like, you know, can help you decompress, you know, even sports and stuff like that.
I was super into sports as a kid. I played soccer for 14 years.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, but that thing is like, it's only decompressing if you're winning, you know?
And like, you got to really find the joy in the ride. You got to really like playing soccer so much, or playing fighting games, or playing whatever so much that it's that losing doesn't remove the decompression or the catharsis from you.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. That just reminded me of I was just thinking about, you know, we often try to avoid or we often go to the most negative thing about ourselves when we have a slight in a conversation or we're misreading somebody. We go to that place and we blame ourselves. And you know, I think what I am learning is kind of what I do for work and even in comedy is try to like use those negative experiences as a teacher. And we've said it's an opportunity. Because one, the funny comes from understanding the pain and the vulnerability.
Yeah.
And two, it kind of allows you to kind of take a step back and kind of look at the situation objectively instead of getting wrapped up in the emotion.
Yeah.
And you know, whether it's just like a bad night at a comedy show or just a bad interaction with somebody, it's just an opportunity again
like put some distance between you and the experience, because you live it so much from your perspective that you forget that there's other perspectives and part of it that you can kind of like, oh, okay.
Right. And you know, back to the friend, I have some nice close people around me, and I just ask them like, how do you observe me, like, you know, in interactions?
That's a good question.
You know, how like what are the things that could potentially appear like that annoying about me or whatever, because then I can hear it from like close friends.
Yeah.
And then it's an opportunity for me to like think about it and pay attention to it.
Definitely.
It won't help that friendship, and then kind of see how I can play with that too out in the world and see like, okay, this is something I'm growing and developing. And and when you have good people around you to kind of point those things out, it's good. It's good. It's good for them to see what
the areas in which they could grow.
Yeah,
Definitely.
Yeah.
All right. We're going to take a real quick commercial break, and we'll be right back with the smoke break. We're here every Sunday from 9 to 10 a.m. on Shady Pines Radio, as well as Pretty Dope Experience Radio.
Welcome back to the smoke break. We are here every Sunday from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. on Shady Pines Radio and Pretty Dope Experience. Our next topic that we're going to dive into is no, that was the last one.
That was the last one.
De-escalation.
Yes. The thing we do after we decompress.
Exactly.
I don't know.
Who knows? Pick your order. De-escalation is kind of a new topic for me, honestly. I learned just the idea of being escalated and de-escalating within the last, like those specific words at least. Yeah. The concept's always kind of been there, but those words help define it a lot. Do you have any experience with like de-escalating, or it being new to you, or like learning anything from the process of de-escalating?
Yeah, definitely. So like with my work as a peer, I've definitely had to learn that like there are going to be situations where people are escalated, and it is my job to try to bring them down from that, and I've had people in my life just be like super, like really intense, and like I've had to receive that without like being offended by it, and I feel like that's almost like the hardest part with de-escalation is like not taking offense to somebody being activated.
Yeah, exactly. I the thing about it is like understanding it's a cycle too, and it's important for people to understand kind of when they are entering that cycle, paying attention to their own warning signs, and for other people sometimes to be aware of that. But I think that there's part of it when in this cycle, because there'll be like a crisis or kind of a pinnacle of where the emotions are going.
Right.
And then there's recognition like, oh my goodness, I've overreacted or whatever.
Yeah.
And then there's the post-crisis depression, which is kind of where you're de-escalating, but you're not kind of back to your baseline yet. And that period in people looks like sometimes they're calm and back to where they should be, but but that's the period where even when I'm working with parents, I have to tell them, you have to just pay attention. Your kid might appear ready to kind of process and talk, but they might not be there yet.
Yeah.
They have to kind of go through this feeling of remorse for what they're going through, and then when they're ready, you check in and things are okay. Well,
I like what you said about like kind of that remorseful period of like, once you hit a point where you're like super activated and you're like you're doing all these things that like are uncharacteristic of you, that there is that like that kind of depression slump of like, oh, that was a lot, like maybe it took somebody bringing it up, but also at the same time like I understand that was a lot, and trying to like navigate that you handled something the way you would normally or want to handle it.
It's always felt kind of like visually for me like a heartbeat monitor, where you spike in this anger and then it just drops, and now you're in this like huge slump of depression. You kind of have to get back to your baseline, and that movement of emotions is really, really intense for an individual to deal with. But having experienced those makes it easier for me to be understanding towards people that are experiencing that, because I'm like, oh, you're at this point, aren't you? What I mean? And without throwing it in their face, you kind of just have to really accept them for the way that they are.
Yeah.
The adverse though is also paying attention when you're feeling good too. I think people can kind of escalate in different ways. I mean, I sometimes even when I'm like in the moment of feeling amazing, I'm like, okay, let's just pay attention to where I'm at for a second.
Yeah.
Just to kind of like, I don't want even the good emotions to necessarily dictate what I'm going to do next.
Definitely.
So it's
definitely.
not
Especially when you have things like mania and stuff.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah. So you have to just kind of keep paying attention to how you don't have to, but it's because sometimes you just want to like live in that moment and then reflect later. But sometimes it's kind of nice to just say, okay,
like check in
with myself. Like what's going on around me. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned mania, because like I think you and I are both diagnosed with bipolar. I'm bipolar type 2, and so it's really difficult for me to not let the highs of like being in a really good mood dictate a lot of my choices and actions and stuff like that, because it's like you really want to ride that wave of like things are good now, just keep going. And I really like how you mentioned just like taking a step back and like really asking yourself what you want to be doing in that moment, and or if it's being dictated by like the really intense emotions that you're experiencing. I think a lot of people don't view the good emotions as something that's worth checking in on too, because they're just trying to ride that wave of being in a good mood.
Good.
Yeah, definitely. So like, what are some important things for you to validate someone who's escalated?
A lot of times just listening, like really listening, and it's taking it, and you have to recognize that everybody is projecting an aspect of who they are onto you. Like, doesn't matter. I could be complimenting you. It's like my own value system
Yeah.
and negative. And if you kind of get in a habit of paying attention to how that's communicated, one, you start setting those boundaries, and you just kind of, what I'm trying to say here is that you try to be more aware of your own experience when you're with somebody as well,
Yeah.
Like you can frame their emotions a little bit more effectively because you understand the process of that a little bit better.
Yeah, you understand the process, and it's a way of like not taking things as personally either.
Definitely.
I think, and you can recognize that this might be who they are at that moment as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I like that you said that, just kind of like putting that distance between like, taking it personal. Cause I feel like a lot of times when somebody gets escalated, we're like, they're upset at me, and it's like, it's not often that they're upset at us. They're upset at the situation, and we're in the middle of that situation.
Right. Yeah.
It's a lot of, I mean, my mind's going to all these people that I've seen and worked with, and, just validating them that like, you're not crazy at all. Like let's just go through the list of things that have happened.
Yeah, definitely.
And
well, I think that's even a good point too, is just kind of like going through the list of things that have happened. If this happened and then this happened and then this happened, of course you would feel this way. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah. And getting, I think the hard part though is sometimes those people want someone else to acknowledge their own experience. And some people don't want to take accountability for whether they yelled at somebody or treated somebody in some hostile way or something like that. And that is really hard on the person who's saying like, this is my personal truth. This is what happened. Why are you telling me that it didn't happen this way? And I say, well, you can only own your truth. And how do you want to be in this world? Do you want to like continue to feel like you're in a place of defense, or do you want to move forward and kind of use this person as a teacher to kind of be the person that you idealized yourself to be? So that's, again, I think of these negative experiences or these negative interactions as you're just teaching me something. Like what can I develop from this?
Yeah. Taylor, what about you? What's been some like tactics that you feel like have been helpful in like de-escalating?
Just owning my role, if there was one in a situation. Like I definitely have had a bad tendency in the past to like raise my voice, and that's especially if I feel like someone's attacking me, that I feel like it's wise to kind of offer that accountability, like, hey, yeah, I did get a little escalated there and I raised my voice, and the moment that I notice that there's any volume being added to my voice at all, I've been a lot better in the last couple of years about just like dropping that and being like, hey, let's fix this. And just kind of owning my role in that situation, and offering accountability to the person, not even necessarily kind of in the hopes that I can get that reciprocated, but just to show them that like we're not against each other right now. I can offer this to you, and whenever you're ready to kind of break this down a little bit and work through this frustration, then I'll be here waiting for you in the middle.
Yeah, and that's something that I like that you said was, like, we're in this together. Like I feel like oftentimes when people are getting escalated, or at least in my experience, it's that like it's this me against you,
right?
Instead of it being a like us against the problem.
I'm smiling because I often think back to the Big Lebowski movie with John Goodman, where he says "calmer than you are." That goes through my head a lot when somebody, it's like a mantra in my head. I'm like, I'm just going to be calmer than you are, because that's all I can do right now. I'm going to be calm and like put up my mind barriers right here and see if I can try to understand what's going on here.
Yeah, well, and I think that's like a really important part is like understanding genuinely where somebody's coming from with a problem, because it's like it's not coming from out of nowhere, you know? Like most times it's not coming from out of nowhere. So if it's not coming from out of nowhere, what are the parts of it that you can validate? What are the parts of it that you can say, hey, I understand why you're feeling this way? Because I feel like oftentimes most people just want to feel like they're not in the wrong for feeling the way that they feel.
Right.
So if you can offer them the validation that what they're feeling is proportionate to what they're experiencing, then, you know, you could really give them a chance to feel seen and heard.
And just like letting, like you said, just kind of accepting it, like just letting the person go through the waves of emotions and not putting like a time frame on it for them. You know, like they kind of set their own time frame and they kind of go through the process on their own terms.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously you'll get better at it, but that's why it's so important, I think, for, you know, and not everybody, parents and other people, don't have these tools, because we learn what we learn from how we were raised and the culture around us. And you know, I just wish there was more opportunity for kids and parents. I mean, I really think kids they should just be part of a curriculum regularly for kids to have like understanding of counseling and or understanding of being therapy. And then,
well, I mean, we don't get given those base like how to interact with the world. They're like, here's basic math and basic English and basic science. It's like, what about basic fucking human?
Basic communication skills.
Basic communication skills.
Yeah,
just anything.
I mean, if they taught this stuff, the middle schoolers would be a lot happier.
Oh yeah,
like, that's absolutely. Like the time everybody's like, oh, the dreads the middle school years, because that's the time where they're just really figuring out, I am my own person. I can say what I want to say.
But they have more emotions and opinions than the words to display them appropriately.
Yeah. And teaching them how to be accountable would also, you know, not it would raise accountable adults. You know, like if you can show somebody that they can be honest about like a mistake that they made, then you could give them the opportunity to know that there's like growth behind that and potential for growth. Yeah.
I think a lot of people will counter the things that hurt them a lot too. Like if somebody was raised in an environment where there was a lot of yelling, for example, like they have a tendency, I've noticed in my experience, where if they're not doing that thing, then it's hard for them to accept that they might be like part of the issue or escalating it just because they're not yelling.
Right. You know, it's I noticed this too with predominantly, you know, since I work with kids, I say kids, but predominantly kids that are feeling really depressed, is that I tell them, I said, you appear sad, but are you angry? And I asked them that, and I said, and they're worried that their anger is going to appear like the people that have like externalized that anger to them. And I said, no, you're not that person. What you are is somebody who is entitled to that feeling of anger, and you are learning how to talk about it in a way that you would want somebody to talk to you about your anger. All right. And you're right. Your mom, your dad, your cousin, your boyfriend, whatever, will not necessarily do that. But if you do that, then you are taking care of yourself in this situation.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think, you know, just giving people the tools to like, you know, communicate how they're feeling can help them be de-escalated, you know, like, or even giving them the space. You know, like, and sometimes I think it's important for other people to be open to the idea that like where somebody's coming from with anger is not the thing that they're angry about, you know? Like there was a moment where Taylor and I had gotten into like a confrontation, and he was like, what you're talking about being angry about and what I think you're actually upset about are like two different things, you know? So like, let's try and figure out where this is actually coming from. Because I see the way that it's displaying, but I don't think that's where it's coming from.
I think it helps that we like legitimately give a shit about each other too. So it's like it's we're not taking each other's frustration and escalation as like personal for very long, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
It's good you have a basis of knowing you can come back together. Not everybody's able to do that, you know, and it's hard because I mean, I get to this place like, why do I want to hold on to this thing? You know, like, let's see if there's like room to, you know, I know what I like about this person. I know what they're good at. Can we like focus on those things that we at least have together? If we can't, you know, you figure out what kind of relationship it is too.
Yeah,
you know,
definitely.
And then that's the kind of the thing too of learning in the comedy world is like, okay, you're open to it. There's all these people who do I want to be friends with? Who do I want to be professional friends with? Who can kind of be a hybrid of both, and that's okay. It's a lot like anything else, but it's definitely, that's what this has done for me, is kind of looking a lot of reflection about who I am as an employee where I work, and as kind of like whatever I'm doing in the comedy world now.
Definitely. All right, cool. We're going to take one more quick commercial break. We'll be right back with the smoke break. We're actually going to take two more, but we're here every Sunday from 9 to 10 a.m. on Shady Pines Radio, as well as Pretty Dope Experience Radio. All right, we are going to switch over to our musical portion. So I'd like to introduce musician, peer support specialist, and activist Doug Westberg.
Hey, this is from my new album called I Get the Blues, and it's called Breathalyzer Boogie. Perfectly sober, and I offered to walk the line. The cop just gave me this yellow gizmo, and I blew a .09. The big fat pig, Officer Knightley, threatened to give me a ticket. That's when I told him, oh so politely, exactly where he could stick it. Got sent to the judge. Judge said, I plead, don't give me that DUI. You let me get back behind the wheel, I'll quit tomorrow, it's no big deal. I just take my antabuse, drink my vegetable juice, pop a Mega B10, add a couple of Vicodin, put an olive in my Coke, take an occasional toke. I know how to get off the sauce, Jim B make my boss. Well, the judge said to me, Bub, said he, you're like a drowning Egyptian. You're in denial. In a little while, you'll be looking at a conviction. Well, I paid my bail and I stayed out of jail, but there's just a few conditions. Gotta go to AA 3 meetings a day and serve up soup at the mission. And if that ain't enough, I got an ankle cuff. The cops get an alert if I'm not in church. Gotta blow and go if I'm drunk at nose, and if I've taken a jerk, I gotta walk to work. Got sent to the judge. Judge said, I plead, don't give me that DUI. Let me get back behind the wheel, I'll quit tomorrow, it's no big deal. I just take my antabuse, drink my vegetable juice, pop a Mega B10, and a couple of Vicodin, put an umbrella in my Coke, take an occasional toke. I know how to get off the sauce, Jim B made my boss. Judge said, I've got an airtight alibi. I don't need that legal nudge. I'm as sober as a judge. I said to the judge said, I plead, don't give me that DUI. Just let me get back behind the wheel, I'll quit tomorrow, it's no big deal. Or the day after tomorrow. Monday at the latest. But right now, I'm just gonna go have a little snort, may it please the court. Wouldn't you? But don't worry, I never drunk while I'm driving. I wait till I'm pulled up at a stop sign. Thank you. This is called Sometimes I Imagine Asking Joni. Neptune 14 years ago. Empty interstellar space lies 10 years after Pluto, but I feel like I've got an inch to go. Sometimes I imagine asking Joni why it is Amelia always makes me wanna cry. She was just an aviatrix lost in ancient history, falling like a teardrop from the sky. Me, I'm always snatching failure from the jaws of victory. I do it just to feel like I'm alive. There's a place I like to call the black hole of Calcutta. It lurks deep down just out of my control. It's where I go on down days when I feel like I'm imploding, a dying supernova in my soul. Sometimes I pretend I'm asking Donald and Walter, why would Dr. Wu of all things make me wanna cry? He was just an herbalist who came here from Jakarta, mixing powders in his Pearl Street dive. Am I just a shadow of a man who never started? When will I stop feeling like I'm 5? For years I tried to fill up that black hole with Southern comfort. I've got the victim role down pretty good. I could buy and sell Bill Gates if I could only find a company that paid a guy for being misunderstood. I put together 3 months clean and sober in the program, but they said I couldn't use mood-altering meds. So I stopped going to meetings, then the study lost its funding, and the treatment center didn't have a bed. Sometimes I imagine asking Tori, why would silent all these years invariably make me cry? First off, I'm a guy, my psyche's gotta be mistaken. You know how it is, we're just palookas. But why can't I stop feeling like my wallet's just been taken? Unless that is to say, my name is Luca. Unless that is to say, my name is Luca. Dying, the sails are limp, sun keeps burning, and you're left adrift. Nothing but ocean, stretched far and wide, unbroken horizon on every side. Stuck in the doldrums, you're petrified, drowning in boredom, frozen inside, stuck in the doldrums. It's a downhill slide. You're not trying to live, you're just waiting to die. There's water everywhere, but nothing to drink. You're too empty to cry. You're too tired to think. You're going nowhere, and you're going too slow. When you're not moving, there's nowhere to go. Stuck in the doldrums, you're petrified, drowning in boredom, frozen inside. Stuck in the doldrums, it's a downhill slide. If you're not trying to live, you're just waiting to die. Daydream that nobody had, swirling in visions of a world gone mad. The voices that haunt you are becoming a roar. You pull up the covers, but they scream even more. Stuck in the doldrums, you're petrified, drowning in boredom, frozen inside. Stuck in the doldrums, it's a downhill slide. If you're not trying to live, you're just waiting to die. If you're not trying to live, you're just waiting to die.
And that has been Doug Westberg. We will be right back after a quick commercial break. All right. And we are back with the smoke break. We are here every Sunday from 9 to 10 a.m. on Shady Pines Radio, as well as Pretty Dope Experience Radio. I'm your host, your old pal Zane, here with Taylor Barrett.
Greetings.
And Doug Westberg.
Hey.
Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate the music that you brought. I always appreciate it. That's actually how I met you, was through Peer Apocalypse, and we had met at an open mic over at Heavy Metal Brewing Company.
That's right.
So
yeah,
super talented. So the topic that you wanted to talk about us this week was with us this week is complex PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
It's a heavy one.
I know it's a heavy one. So give us kind of like an idea of what that means for you.
PTSD is generally thought of as originating from a big accident or war, shell shock, they used to call it. Complex PTSD results from trauma that takes place over a much longer period of time.
Sure.
Like a childhood characterized by abuse or neglect, or parents drinking, things like this. Also being a prisoner of war, things like that.
Right.
So I got interested in it because I started seeing myself, wondering if that described me.
Sure. So you had seen a little bit about it, you had heard a little bit of it, and then you're like, okay, but how does this reflect inside of me?
Yeah.
Definitely.
Exactly. Yeah.
So would you say that like that journey of kind of looking back that far has been cathartic?
It has. I write white papers about it. It explains a lot.
Definitely.
And in fact, if I ever get a TED Talk, it's going to be about me laboring under misapprehensions for 40 years, first 20 years, recovering from alcoholism, thinking it's a disease, and trying to treat it as a spiritual malady. And then another 20 years working on my depression, which I didn't get to work on until then because there wasn't any such thing as dual diagnosis.
Through the alcohol parts of it.
Right. Yeah. Depression was a sincere form of self-pity. So anyway, I finally got to work on my depression, but the same kind of deal. It was over medicalized, over pathologized. And what I'm learning now is that depression, alcoholism, addiction, anxiety, those are all symptoms of developmental trauma.
Yeah.
Do you think there's any like glaring misconceptions about I mean there's obviously plenty, but are there any that come to mind that you think should be talked about a little bit more about complex PTSD?
Well, the point is that there's no such thing as mental illness. And people have been saying that, I mean, writers have been saying that for 50 years. But we get overwhelmed by the blandishments of the pharmaceutical industry, and it's the tail wagging the dog. The fact is, addiction and depression and these other things are symptoms of trauma. They're defense mechanisms. They're survival mechanisms that originally come about through surviving your childhood, and then they get triggered in adulthood by things that don't make any sense.
Sure.
And that's really hard for other people to understand.
I see what you're saying. So the root of the point is kind of that, like, all these things that have different avenues for popping up in your adulthood or even like childhood are basically rooting from a specific trauma that you have, or just the stuff that you had to deal with that come up in different ways, that you become an adult and this doesn't make sense to you, or you can't process this, or you can't function normally because of specific traumas that develop defense mechanisms within you.
Exactly. You develop the defense mechanisms, and then they become maladaptations in adulthood. So, I, for example, have spent most of my adult life having to ask permission for everything, and being, afraid of authority figures, and,
I can relate to that.
Being, being susceptible to explosions of temper.
Sure.
And
which is such a strange thing, hearing from such a soft-spoken person. You're like, an explosion of temper. It's like, man, when you lost it, you probably lost it though, because I'm very much like I keep it under the surface until it becomes like this maladaptive. But I think I can agree a lot with like what you're saying, is that like, a lot of these are just kind of reactions to things that like we may have felt out of control of in our past.
Yes.
Like, maybe being yelled at is something that like we felt like we didn't have control over. So now yelling back is the thing that makes us feel like we're in control.
That's how you take the power back.
Definitely.
That's definitely something that I've related to and had to work through. Where, like, when I was previously talking about how I would catch myself raising my voice a lot, I had to break it down and be like, why is this something that I do? And it kind of came from a point of like, if I have the most volume, then I have the most control, and that's I think that's very maladaptive, like you said, kind of defense mechanism where I saw a lot of people that were desperately seeking control, and if I overtalked or talked louder, then I felt like I had control, and it was pushing a lot of people away and kind of preventing a lot of growth.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I mean, I think that, the fact that it comes from you being in a situation where somebody was louder than you, therefore they were right, is the thing that like kind of traumatized you into thinking that like, oh, okay, so this reaction is like an equivalent to it's a way to equalize the situation.
And one thing that I realized was that like, my dad wasn't much of a yeller, my mom wasn't much of a yeller, but there was other people in my life that I saw that had complete control over situations. Like one of my uncles, like I'd be in the room where he would like yell at his kids, and I was like, they obey. They obey without question.
I don't know what it is about uncles, but they know how to yell.
Yeah, and that kind of taught me that it's like, oh, so that's how you do it. That's how you do that, and that's not how you do that.
No.
You don't want to scare kids into obedience.
You don't want to scare anybody into like into doing what you want. But it's when you feel like I feel like it just comes from like a lot of trying to communicate needs. Like we all have these needs. We get denied these needs when we're younger, and then we try to figure out how to fill those needs when we're older. And because we never learned how to do it before, we find these crazy ways of, and like you said, maladaptive ways of handling things.
Mm-hmm.
So is there anything that you feel like has been extremely like liberating to have worked through from like some of the complex PTSD?
Yeah, very much so. It's been liberating to find that it's not all genetic. We don't understand how things are handed down.
Right.
The way we understand genetics is not the way it really works.
Okay.
So I don't have the alcoholism gene. I don't have a temper because genetically, my father had a temper. It helps me to know that again, these were defense mechanisms that were just evolutionary survival mechanisms in the face of overwhelming, emotions, and so it's a natural thing.
Yeah. Well, I like
for
that you
these
say
symptoms to occur.
I like that you say survival mechanism, because it's like that's literally what we're trying to do, is like just survive.
Exactly.
At a very base level, everyone's just how do I survive, and then from there, is there a way to go from survival to thriving?
But like I feel like most people don't even get to thrive.
Absolutely not. No way.
You spend so much time in this survival mode that you're just like, how do I get to a place where I'm doing better than just making it? Like that's such a crazy concept to me.
Yeah. It's like what can I do to keep Dad from exploding?
Definitely. Yeah. How do I appease this person to make sure that I don't get this reaction?
So that leads to a lot of really extreme watchfulness and reading people.
Yeah, like hyper attentive.
So you carry that into adulthood.
Yeah, definitely.
I've heard a good example of that being carried over in adulthood. It's like being able to know who's walking up the steps because you can tell their footsteps apart, just because you're so used to being like, oh, that's Dad coming and he's angry. Oh, that's Mom coming upstairs to
she's got laundry.
Yeah, exactly. And that like hypervigilance, that like daredevil level of awareness it can be interesting, but it's also like, damn, why do I have to pay so much attention to that? Why do I give a shit?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I
definitely survive.
Yeah, well, definitely. Like, I feel like I've had that hypervigilance of like having to read people, because like my uncle was such a hot and cold person that like we would be cool one second, we're laughing, we're having fun, and then a second he would just be like, nope, we're not having fun, I'm angry now, and like all fun that was happening a second ago is now ceasing. And so it's like I've had to not necessarily had to, but I felt as though I've had to be hyper vigilant in most situations of like interacting with people. It's like, are we good? Are we still good? Without asking, without asking constantly, are we okay? Are you mad at me? But like still trying to like suss out like, hey, is everything good? We were good a second ago.
The changes in like tone, changes in like tone, facial expression.
That stuff messes me up so
facial
bad.
expression has been the biggest one for me. But a different uncle, I called it like stone face, where he like we would goof off all the time, but sometimes he'd come into the room with just this like locked in stone face, and I'm like, I'm in some shit. This is bad.
Yeah. And I have like, go ahead.
For me, I was counting martinis. He'd come home from work and he'd have a martini, and so far so good. And then he'd have another one, and he'd have another one, and then things, you really, started to worry. Then he'd have a fourth one, and all hell would break loose.
Like a scale of risk, where the one's a very low risk, 2 risk gets higher, 3 shit's probably going to go down, 4 we're for sure in it now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, it's hard because like I feel like something like alcohol is something that helps you decompress, but like can also fucking be cause for de-escalation, because it's like it's the thing that should be making you feel better. It's the thing that should be like relaxing you, but it like if there's too much of it, then it can be the opposite effect, where it's like I feel myself like hyper, like amped up and like in somebody's face, where it's like that wouldn't be me normally. Like that's whatever I wanted to communicate. And alcohol is that's a tricky one. It's a tricky one.
Alcohol is a very tricky one, because it's so easy to just be like, oh, this kind of shuts everything off for a second, and then you get so used to just turning to that for shutting everything off, and now when something does arise, because all of your facilities are kind of shut off willingly, now you don't have the tools to navigate that or articulate it nearly as effectively, and that you get very explosive.
Yeah, definitely. So as far as like with working with like complex PTSD, what would you recommend for somebody who's trying their best to like work through that? Like what would be an avenue of support that they could find?
First of all, find a counselor who's aware of trauma,
trauma-informed
treatment.
Mm-hmm.
Find somebody who asks about your background.
Yeah.
Wants to know about the trauma in your background, and go from there.
Yeah, so finding a therapist that like is very specifically like wants to be aware of that part of it.
Yes,
because because so many things lead back to like what happened before that. Like if you don't have somebody who's counting that part of it, it's
almost absurd.
Sure.
And I think there's kind of almost a joke within the therapy.
It's like
world.
It gets like. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh no, yeah.
It gets like, if all you have is a hammer, everything it looks like a nail.
Yeah.
So if all you have is medication, then everything
seems like it could be solved.
Diagnosis. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the joke within the like the therapy community is that it all comes back to childhood, but I think that's kind of a consistent joke because it ends up being pretty consistently true. Is that your childhood is where you learned all these defense mechanisms? So there is kind of the laughable concept of like if you go to a therapist, they're gonna start talking about your childhood, but like. Maybe you should talk about your childhood a little bit more. Talk about your dad.
Yeah, it's because your brain is forming
exactly.
All through up to 7 years of age and on. Your brain is building with thousands and thousands of circuits every day.
Yeah,
and if you're constantly under stress, then that gets carved into the deeper recesses of your brain.
Yeah, definitely.
And then it's really easy to overlook that too, especially when you're able to like disconnect from your family sometimes. And you're like, well, now I'm separated from that, so those issues are no longer prevalent in my life. But that's really important that you mentioned that if you are developing those neuron connections when your brain's developing and
you're around them.
Yeah, and you're developing that under the stress, then those are going to be developed with stress defense mechanisms in them, and there's a lot of unlearning to have to do, and a lot of self-acceptance.
Yes.
Definitely.
Yeah. And treatment that involves a whole body movement, comforting activities, connecting with people.
Yeah.
Theater is one great one.
I'm sure music and stuff like that works wonders.
Yeah. Those are real important.
All right. Awesome.
Yeah,
well, hey,
much more so than talk therapy is.
Yeah, well, I feel like just even having like an outlet for it, like trying to figure out a way to put those things into words. Like I heard so many of your lyrics, just like I appreciate your music for that reason, is because it does talk about like a real experience, but it does it in a way that's cathartic for you. So
yeah,
Doug, thanks you so much for joining us.
Absolutely,
I really enjoyed having you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. All right, well, that has been The Smoke Break. We're here every Sunday from 9 to 10 a.m. on Shady Pines Radio, as well as Pretty Dope Experience Radio. I've been your host, your old pal Zane, here with Taylor Barrett.
Peace out.
And Doug Westberg. Later. Cool. Thank you.
Absolutely.